The full moon emerges from behind the clouds, sending its cursed light onto the sweating body of a young man. His breath gets heavier with the pain that is raging through him as his body becomes leaner, longer and stronger. Teeth become savage fangs of destruction as he slowly emerges from the shadows as a werewolf, and his lust for blood is all he can think about. It's not exactly clear when the werewolf legend came about, as they make an early appearance in Greek mythology with the legend of Lycaon. It is said that Lycaon served a meal from the remains of a sacrificed boy to the god Zeus. Furious with what had been presented to him, Zeus decided to punish Lycaon by cursing him and his sons, turning them into werewolves. In Europe, werewolf trials were as common as the witch trials were in America, and carried out from the 15th to the 17th century, brought about by religion, superstition and other clashes. If you were seen as different, maybe a beggar or an immigrant, then all eyes turned to you if a scapegoat was needed. The torture that these people had to endure is beyond sickening, and many would confess just to have it all end. So where to start with our werewolf journey? Let's begin with Peter Stubb, described as history's most notorious werewolf. Stubb was drawn to many dark things in life and is said to have made a pact with the devil so that he could pursue them. He wanted to take the form of a werewolf when he killed. Stubb got a real taste for blood, and before long, all you had to do was look at the man wrong to find yourself on his hit list. He was so blatant in his disregard for others that he would walk the streets saluting the families of those he'd killed. But ripping the throats out of people he disliked was not enough for Stubb, as he also took to raping some of his victims. He would stay as a man for the sexual attack and then morph into a wolf to kill and eat them. Records say that Stubb was responsible for the deaths of 13 children and 2 pregnant women. As well as killing, he also took up incest, with his own sister and daughter producing offspring. He killed one member of his family by luring them to nearby fields and then attacking. The man was sick to the core. He terrorised his village for 25 years until finally being caught and surrounded by a large group of men. Now, knowing he was trapped and with nowhere to run, he turned back into his human form, which stunned the hunters as they all knew him. He was a nice, polite man. In 1590, Stubb was finally executed in Bedburg, Germany. He was tortured with red-hot pincers, tearing off 10 pieces of his flesh while on the wheel, and his limbs were snapped before finally cutting off his head and burning his remains. But was he a werewolf? Or did he suffer from a mental illness of some kind that turned him into a killing machine? Maybe he was just that, a killer. And to make sense of his brutal acts, the villagers made him out to be a different kind of monster, as surely no human being was capable of such acts. In Dole, eastern France, Gilles Garnier, nicknamed the Hermit of Dole, was executed after being convicted of lycanthropy. There have been many cases of half-eaten children in the area, and so with that in mind, the Parliament of Franche-Comté issued a decree in 1573 that locals hunt down any werewolves they could find so that they could be brought to trial. Apparently, Gilles attacked a 10-year-old girl at a local vineyard in 1572. When he found somewhere more secluded, he took off her clothes and ate flesh from her thighs and arms, removing more flesh to take back for his wife Apolline. Over the following weeks, he attacked more children until he finally got caught. After killing another young boy, he dragged the body off into the woods but was caught by workers returning home. Thinking it was an animal eating the boy, the men lifted their torches to illuminate the area better, only to discover a man. As you can well imagine, Garnier was tortured until he confessed. He said that he had married in 1572 and spent the majority of his life living in St. Bonnet Woods as a hermit. But when he and his wife had children, he discovered it was a struggle to find enough food to feed them all. Garnier claims that a spectre appeared before him one evening and offered an ointment that could turn him into a wolf. After admitting to killing 4 children, he was burned alive at the stake. Fear must have been something that was felt by many, especially if you were poor or seen as different. In 1651, a young 18-year-old boy called Hans was executed for lycanthropy in Estonia. When he was brought before the judges, Hans did something that was totally unexpected. He confessed to being a werewolf. Did this have something to do with the fact that the young man was trying to avoid torture? Quite likely. He said that for 2 years he had taken the form of a wolf but had not killed anyone. Hans also stated that he had been bitten by a man wearing black garments, whom he only discovered to be a werewolf after. Fascinated with the young man, the judges decided to ask him questions about his transformation. Hans told them that while he was in the form of the wolf, he felt more like a beast than a man, believing the transformation to be physical as well as spiritual. Well, poor Hans didn't get any reprieve, even though there was no evidence of any deaths. The statement about a werewolf dressed in black was taken as him having made a pact of witchcraft with the devil. Even at his trial, the young boy showed a scar on his body which looked to be from a canine, but this could easily have been a regular dog bite and not one given by a werewolf. Now, some people do tend to boast about things that they might not actually have carried out, maybe to make others admire them, or so that they can fit in with their peers, whatever the reason. It certainly bit this 14-year-old boy on the butt. You see, in 1603, the Saint Severs district of Gascony in southwest France was in the grip of real horror. Little boys and girls were going missing from nearby fields and roads, including a baby that was taken silently from its crib while its mother was close by. Several witnesses came forward, including a 13-year-old girl who claimed she was attacked under a full moon, and another who said she'd been watching cattle when a wolf attacked her in daylight. Jean Grenier was smitten with 18-year-old Jean Caboriart, and while confessing his love and devotion, remarked that he was only as filthy as he appeared due to a wolf skin that he wore to turn himself into a wolf. He then further boasted that he was part of a pack of 9 werewolves who got together 3 times a week to hunt for food in the area, even stating that he preferred young children as their flesh was more tender. As you can well imagine, the young lady was horrified and scared out of her mind at Jean's confession. When he was arrested, he freely spoke about his life and darker side without the use of torture. He claimed to have run away from home as his father was abusive, and so made a living from begging and cow herding. One evening, a boy that he knew took him to meet the Lord of the Forest, who gave Jean an icy kiss and a mark on his thigh. With instructions to never cut his left thumbnail, he was also given a wolfskin and ointment to help him transform. He confessed that his first killing was that of a 3-year-old girl whom he said he ate whole. He also claimed to have attacked a young boy but was chased off by the older brother, a fact that was backed up in court. Surprisingly, and maybe due to his age and poor upbringing, he was sent to stay at Franciscans at the Friary of St. Michael the Archangel in Bordeaux in 1603. A few years later, Jean was visited by Pierre de Lancre to see how he was doing, and his guest was left horrified. Jean was described as appearing more animal than man, even walking around on all fours. He had long teeth that seemed like fangs. His eyes were sunken and with dark circles around them. His hands were long and nails like talons. He died in 1611. Jean quite likely suffered from some form of psychological disorder, but even so, his story is truly terrifying. We'll finish on a more modern werewolf case, dated 1849, which took place in the hamlet of Polomia, modern-day Poland. The locals at this time were very poor, but still managed to show generosity to a local beggar who would sit outside the church. The man was called Swiatek and described as having a long white beard. After being fed by a family one evening, he took a shine to a young girl that was staying there who he believed to be an orphan. He gave her a ring as a gift and instructed her to go to the churchyard and recite an incantation where she might find more jewels. The only problem? She must go alone. Soon after he left the family, the young girl went off on her solo adventure, but was never seen again. And she was not alone, as a number of young children seemed to disappear in the same area, leading locals to believe they had a wolf problem. Villagers started to kill any wolves that they came across, but when the local innkeeper also managed to lose a couple of his ducks, suspicion fell on the beggar. As the innkeeper approached the beggar's home, the smell of roasting meat was detected. He rushed into the small hut, surprising the man inside, who hastily hid something on his person. The innkeeper grabbed him, and after a small struggle, the head of the 14-year-old girl fell from his clothes. The villagers searched the home from top to bottom and were disgusted at what they found. The young girl had been butchered expertly, with organs removed and cleaned and limbs roasting over a fire. Swiatek confessed to having killed and eaten 6 people, claiming he got a taste for human flesh after a fire had broken out in a tavern and he had eaten the meat found there as he was so hungry. Locals believed he was suffering from lycanthropy, but before any official charges could be brought against him, he hung himself in prison. So how many people were convicted of being werewolves? Several papers claimed that 30,000 people were executed as werewolves in France alone between 1520 and 1630, whereas others believe the figure to be less than 1,000. Today we've discussed the stories of just a handful of so-called werewolves. Do you believe any of them might have been cursed to change from man to wolf? Maybe they were shapeshifters. Or do you think that ignorance was running wild and it was easier to throw blame than truly see what was going on? Maybe the person was mentally ill. Or could they have been a serial killer or child abuser, as a lot of deaths were women and children? One thing is for sure. Werewolves have a huge cult following, with sightings still being reported to this day. So next time you venture anywhere secluded, like a nature trail, a forest, or even a quiet winding road, you might not be alone. Eyes could be watching you from behind the trees, waiting for the ideal moment to pounce.